Okay, so the temperature for the sauce is now up to par, like where it should be. It's got angel kisses all over it. It's looking really good, smelling really good. I went ahead and I always make sure it's important that you scrape the bottom of the pan because all of the thickness likes to settle and you don't want that to burn. And you can start to smell when that's happening. Like you can actually really get a good sense of that just from paying attention to the smell of the sauce. But we're looking good. And actually, it's interesting because you can actually see that the mushrooms I did on the first day are now really truly just coming down to tiny little bits of, and the tomatoes that I crushed with my hands are dissolving practically. So anyway, and I put that back into a can of water. Okay, so this is my Italian sausage. I have a mix of sweet and hot. I like to do both, even if I had family members who didn't like hot, which would have been both Anna and Flint. I was the only one. But Grandma Bender always taught me to cut the Italian sausage differently for hot than from sweet, so that way people who were grabbing from the plate would know. Because the hot can be really spicy, especially Carmen Leonardo's. They like to put a little bit of punch in theirs. So what happens is like a hot would be on a diagonal, and then a sweet, let me see if I can find a sweet, would be straight on. So that is how she would do it. That's how I do it. And you can always smell it. Like there's a difference in the smell of the sweet compared to the hot. There's a diagonal. And so, and the hot can be a little bit more red if you really look at it. But when it's cooked, you can't really tell. So the only way you can tell. So to put it in the pot, you want to stick it from the outside in. And you go around the pot with it. And you just stick them in. And so hopefully you can see what I'm doing. This is kind of fun to try to figure out the angles of the camera. And this is the same way we do the, oops, well, you could do that too, where you just plopped it in and splattered sauce all over. That happens. But meatballs are the same, of where you put them from the outside in and then push them down with a spoon. And you'll see how much room you actually end up having because you can kind of stack your meat that way and get quite a bit of meat in there. So you can see that all the meat is on top. So then I'm just going to gently push down and let it go down. So that way they're covered. Boop, boop. And they will. They'll start to really get covered. Now my sauce is now pretty close to the top of the pan, which is where you kind of want to keep it. Eventually this will start to cook down and you're going to start to get oils on the top, which you can choose to go ahead and skim or stir in. I do a little bit of both because I do like some of the oils. That's part of the process of breaking the sauce down, but you don't want a ton of it. And so if there's a lot of fat that ends up getting on top, I skim it off and then I add water. And that process of adding water and the oils and all of that is what really starts to season the sauce and break down the acidity of the sauce. I don't really do a lot of seasonings to the sauce at this time because of all this process. It's just going to keep changing. So you don't want to be like adding salt and then later you find out you really didn't need it. And so this isn't the time to add a lot of seasonings. I wait till the third day usually to do that last bit of seasoning help. This is going to do a lot of the seasoning itself is through the meat. I did watch a video of an Italian restaurant in New York. I think it was New York. It might have been New Jersey. But it was one that Frank Sinatra went to on a regular basis along with Dean Martin. And the man who ran it is, at the time of the video, which was a couple of years now, was still alive. And he was like this super old, tiny Italian man. And he did it the way his grandmother. So imagine, like, he was like really super old in this video. So it was like his grandmother or great grandmother did it. And they've been doing it since they got to, since before they got to America. And he was like first generation here or something. I don't know. But it was It was Old World. And it was the first time I saw on a public station someone doing our sauce. And he was doing it almost identical to what we do. The only difference was he would also, like, because he was in a restaurant, right? So he would also put in his pork shank for pork ossobuco in the bottom of the sauce before he, so like it would cook with that, and then he'd pull that out and serve that as pork ossobuco. So interestingly enough, but after he would pull that out, he would add his Italian sausage, and then he would add his meatballs. He did it identical. And I was like, kind of felt almost vindicated, because so many shows you see of people making meatballs and Italian sauce looks nothing like this. And so I was like, is this, I was told that Grandma learned it from the old Italian lady. She would actually go and she wanted to do this right for Grandpa Bender. And so she would go and learn from these old Italian women doing their sauce. And that's where this all came from. At least that's the story I heard. I don't know if that's real or not, but that's what I was told. So I was always like, well, I'm not seeing anyone else do it. So did she make this up? Like, is this real? And then I saw it, and it was because it was super old style. And I'm like, oh my God. So her saying this was the old world way, she wasn't lying, I don't think. Because, he was doing it exactly. And this was the way that Frank Sinatra liked it. And he would say it would be like his mother's sauce and all this stuff. So I have a pretty strong sense that in certain areas, because, it's not going to be this way everywhere in Italy, obviously, but certain areas, and where my dad's side of the family comes from is Potenza, up in the North Range, but also Salerno, which is south of Rome. So I don't know where this kind of comes from, but Grandpa Bender always knew of it somehow. So a lot of mystery on my family side, but regardless, it's the way Frank Sinatra likes it, so it can't be all that bad.